The cold came wrong. Harith knew the north as a fisherman knew tides. He had felt winter claw down from the lands beyond the wall when leaves still burned red in the wolfswood, and he had trudged through the tail end of summer snows that vanished by noon beneath a kindly sun. This was neither of those things. The air had sharpened in a single night until every breath cut the throat. Ice glazed the pine needles. A skin of frost lay over the moss. Even the horses seemed to feel the wrongness of it, tossing their heads and blowing white gusts as if a wolf lay somewhere close in the trees. "There should be birds," said Oliver, the youngest of them, his voice too loud in the stillness. "There should be women warm in bed for you as well," Benjen muttered. "The world is full of things that ought to be and aren't." No one laughed. Harith would have taken laughter gladly. Laughter meant men were still thinking like men. They rode single file beneath black pines and bone-pale weirwoods. 6 black brothers where a dozen might once have gone. The Night's Watch did not have a dozen men to spare for every vanished village. Too many castles along the wall stood dead and dark. Too many black cloaks hung now on fewer shoulders. Lord Commander Corgyle had sent them because the trappers from the new gift had come babbling of smoke seen 2 days in a row beyond the wall, and then nothing at all, and because 3 hunters who knew every stream between the Milkwater and the Frostfangs had failed to return. The old chief of that wildling village had traded skins at Castle Black twice in Harith's memory. He had sons enough to make trouble and daughters enough to be worth fighting over, and a laugh like a cracked horn. Villages did not simply go still in the middle of autumn. "There," said Tumber. He pointed with the head of his spear. Through the trees, half buried under a whitening veil, stood the first of the huts. Low, round, sod-roofed, their doors of hide and rough timber hung open to the wind. No dog barked. No child cried. No smoke rose. Harith lifted a fist, and the others checked their mounts. The silence pressed at them. Not the ordinary silence of the wood, which was never silent at all if a man listened well enough. No rustle of squirrel. No croak of raven. No drip of meltwater. The world had gone still as a held breath. "Torches," Harith said. Bannon swore, but he reached for the bundle at his saddle. Soon, orange light licked and spat in the blue gloom. The flames looked small. They went in on foot, leading the horses. The first corpse sat propped against a hut wall with his chin upon his chest. A broad-shouldered man with his beard frozen into a white fan upon his breast. His hands were black. Frost rimed his lashes. Harith knelt. The skin was hard as old wood. He could not tell whether the man had been dead a day or 10. He had no marks on him that Harith could see. "He froze," said Oliver, grateful for an answer. "In this," Harith said, and looked up. Snow had gathered in a thin, unbroken sheet over the village path. Not trampled, not scored by boot or bare foot. No one had fled. No one had fought. The women and children lay in their huts or just outside them, as if death had come softly and set each one where it pleased. Tumber made the sign men made south of the neck, though he wore black now and served on the wall. Cold gods. Harith nearly told him to hold his tongue, but he found his own mouth gone dry. He had heard old tales in the common hall as a boy, though his mother had cuffed him for listening. White shadows in the woods. Dead men with blue eyes. Queens stolen from their beds. Stories to frighten children and make men drink closer to the fire. The Watch had no use for stories. The Watch had use for tracks, numbers, weather, steel. Yet when he looked at the village, he found himself remembering how his mother used to bolt the door when snow hissed across the eaves. They found the chief in the largest hut, sprawled beside a cold fire pit with a bone cup by his hand. His wife lay across the threshold. 3 children were huddled in the far corner like pups. Harith stooped and touched one little girl's cheek. "Ice die." Benjen drew back the chief's furs with the point of his spear. "No wound. Maybe a sickness," Oliver said. "Some pest from Hardhome or..." The child in the corner opened its eyes. Oliver cried out. Benjen jerked around so hard the spearhead struck the roof pole. For the space of a heartbeat, nobody moved. The little girl sat up slowly. Frost cracked over her lashes. Her eyes shone an impossible blue, bright as frozen stars. She looked at Hareth with no more life in her face than a fish laid on a board. Then she sprang. Small as she was, she hit Hareth with the force of a thrown stone. He went over backward, one gloved hand catching her face as the tiny black teeth snapped at his throat. She stank of cold earth and old meat. Her fingers clawed into his beard and cheek. He shouted and flung her from him. She struck the far wall, folded, and came on again. Benjen buried the spear through her chest. The child did not even seem to feel it. Tumber hacked at her neck with his axe and missed in his panic, biting deep into one shoulder. The girl writhed around the spear shaft like something boneless, reaching. Hareth snatched a brand from the dead hearth and shoved it into the front of her fur jerkin. The skin hissed. Then, at last, she screamed. A thin, ugly sound that no human throat should have made, and the smell of burning hair and old grease filled the hut. "Outside!" Oliver shouted. Hareth lunged through the doorway into white light and spinning snow. The dead wildling by the wall was on his feet. So was the old woman who had lain beside the path, and a boy with half his face chewed away, and a man with both hands blackened to the wrist. They moved awkwardly but fast enough, the way a corpse might move in a nightmare, all jerks and sudden purpose. Oliver had fallen, his torch rolling into the snow. The black-fingered man was clawing at his leg. "Fire!" Hareth roared. "Burn them!" Torches flew. Benjen's beard caught a spark. Tumber split the old woman's head open to the teeth, and she still dragged herself onward with her fingers working like white spiders. One of the horses screamed and reared, wrenching its lead free. Another kicked through a hut door. Snow whirled. Flame guttered. The dead came at them from every side of the village now, rising from drifts, pushing out through hides, stumbling from doorways with blue eyes bright and empty. Hareth seized Oliver by the collar and hauled him up. Something caught his calf in a grip like iron. He looked down and saw a child's hand, black with frost, closing through his mail. He stamped until fingers broke. Benjen was shouting for the horses. Tumber was no longer shouting at all. Then the wood beyond the village moved. At first, Hareth thought the trunks themselves were shifting in the snow. Then the shapes slid between them, lean and tall and pale as moonlit ice. They were armored, though not in any steel forged by men. Light ran over them in strange cold ripples. One paused beside a weirwood white bark against whiter flesh, and turned its face toward the village. Hareth had hunted in moonlight, and walked the wall at midnight. He knew what cold looked like. This was not that. This was winter with a will. The thing raised one hand. Every corpse in the village turned toward the brothers of the watch. Benjen broke first. He snatched his horse's reins and flung himself into the saddle. Hareth would have cursed him if fear had left him breath enough. Oliver was crying. Tumber had vanished under a pile of moving dead. The pale shapes in the trees advanced without haste, as though they had all the years in the world and knew it. Hareth dragged Oliver toward the horses. A dead woman caught at the boy's cloak. Hareth slashed her across the face with his short sword, and the blade rang strangely on frozen flesh. Oliver nearly made the saddle before a dead man with half a skull lunged from the snow and tore him down. Hareth heard the crack of bone. He did not look back a second time. He rode. Branches whipped his face. Snow stung his eyes. Once he glanced over his shoulder and saw shapes slipping through the pines behind him, not running, not hurrying, but always there. His horse went lame by dusk and died before midnight, foam frozen on its lips. Hareth kept going on foot, torch in one hand, sword in the other, staggering south toward a wall he could not yet see. The cold stayed with him. He slept once against a rock and woke with blue frost in his beard and the sound of something walking around him in the dark. On the third morning he saw the wall at last, faint and ghost pale against a sky like hammered lead. He might have wept if his tears had not frozen in the corners of his eyes. By the time he reached Castle Black, he could no longer feel his hands. Men were shouting from above. The gate beneath the wall was opening. Someone ran to catch him as he fell from the saddle of a horse he did not remember stealing. He hit the ground on his knees, tasted blood and old snow, and tried to say the word that mattered. Only when a gloved hand gripped the back of his head and a voice barked, "Speak, man," did the sound tear itself loose. "The dead," Hareth gasped. "The dead are walking." Castle Black had been built for long wars and longer winters, but that morning it felt brittle as old bone. Hareth woke on rough planks in the infirmary with his boots off and strips of linen bound around his hands. His first instinct was to reach for his sword. His fingers would not close. A blind old man sat beside the cot, his chain glimmering softly against black wool. "Do not try to rise yet," the old man said. "Your body is still deciding whether it wishes to keep faith with you." "Maester," Hareth croaked. "Maester Aemon," the old man said. "And you have brought me an ugly tale." Hareth shut his eyes. Behind them he saw the little girl with the blue eyes. "It was no tale." "I know." The answer struck him harder than disbelief would have done. Hareth pushed himself onto one elbow. The room wheeled. Aemon put one cool hand on his shoulder, not forceful, merely steady. "How many?" the maester asked. "6 went." Hareth swallowed. "1 came back." Aemon's sightless eyes lifted at the sound of steps outside. "And now," he murmured, "you will tell it again." Lord Commander Corgyle stood in the doorway with 2 stewards behind him. He was a spare, sun-dark Dornishman worn thin by the wall, with a hard mouth and eyes that missed very little. No one looking at him would have guessed sand and heat in his blood. The wall had a way of sanding men down until they belonged to it alone. The Lord Commander listened without interrupting while Hareth told of the village, the dead, the white shadows in the wood. Once, when Hareth spoke of the child rising, one of the stewards let out a nervous bark of laughter. Corgyle turned his head and the sound died at once. "You saw no tracks leaving the village?" the Lord Commander asked when Hareth was done. "None." "No wounds on the dead before they rose?" "None." "The pale shapes, how many?" Hareth shut his eyes. 3 that I saw, maybe more. They did not rush. They did not need to. Corgyle's face gave nothing away. "And Olivar, Bannon, Tumber?" "Dead." The Lord Commander looked to Aemon. "Could fever make a man believe this?" "It could," Aemon said. "It could also freeze a man's feet black, but Hareth's feet are sound enough. His wound is stranger to me than fever." "No, done." He touched the red line that ran along Hareth's calf where the little corpse had gripped him. The flesh around it had gone white and hard despite the heat of the room. "Cold burn," said one steward. "Something like it," said Aemon. Corgyle turned to go. "Keep him here. No one speaks of this below stairs until I say otherwise." It was too late for that, though. By midday, every black brother in Castle Black seemed to know some version of what Hareth had said. By evening, the tale had swollen feathers and grown claws. There were 20 pale riders now, and dead giants, and eyes like lanterns. Men laughed louder than they needed to in the common hall. One of the cooks crossed himself. Another swore by the old gods that his grandfather had warned him. Just before dusk, the horse came in. Its rider had not survived the road. He was lashed to the saddle with a rope under his arms, his head bowed onto his breast. The horse itself had foam frozen on its mane and blood on one flank where something had clawed it. A builder caught the bridle as it staggered into the yard. "Ranging from the West Woods," someone called. Corgyle came at once. So did Aemon, led by a steward. Hareth, raw with helplessness, stood just inside the doorway with a blanket around his shoulders and watched as they cut the dead rider down. It was Tumber. The ranger's face had gone gray as old wax. One ear was missing. Frost glittered in the beard he had so often combed before supper. A smell came with him then, not rot exactly, but the scent of damp cellars and opened earth. "He cannot have ridden like that alone," one of the men said. "He did not," Hareth whispered. The corpse was laid upon a sledge of rough planks beside the armory. to be stripped and burned before full dark. The Lord Commander gave that order twice. Perhaps if it had been obeyed quickly enough, what followed would still have happened. Hareth never knew. Men moved more slowly around death than around danger. First came prayer from one black brother who had worn a Septon's robe in another life, then muttered arguments about whether a man of the watch ought to be burned like a wildling raider, then the fetching of oil, then the waiting for someone higher born or older to say the same thing again. Tumber sat up while they were still arguing. The sound he made was not loud, only wet and sudden, but the whole yard froze to hear it. The nearest steward took half a step back before Tumber threw himself from the sledge and caught him by the throat. They went down together in the snow. Shouting broke over the yard like surf over rocks. Men surged in and out, some with blades already in hand, some with none. Tumber's eyes blazed cold blue in his dead face. He bit through the steward's cheek before a spear took him in the back. The point drove through his chest. He scarcely noticed. "Burn him!" Corgyle roared. No one had a torch. Someone ran. A builder hacked at Tumber's arm and severed it at the elbow. The hand still clutched. The steward beneath him made a bubbling noise. Aemon stood very still, blind eyes turned toward the struggle. "Fire," he said, as if naming a lesson to boys. "Nothing else matters. Fire." Hareth lurched into the yard, seized a brazier from beside the smithy, and tipped it. Coals burst over snow. One lodged in Tumber's beard. Another rolled under the body. Oil arrived an instant later and splashed everywhere. The flame went up hard and hungry, orange pushing back the blue dusk. The corpse convulsed. A crackling shriek tore from its throat. Then at last it sagged, blackened and still. No man spoke for several heartbeats. The wounded steward died before the hour was out. Corgyle had him burned too, without prayer, without argument, by his own command, and before the body cooled. There were mutters after that, but only mutters. Men could live with fear better than with proof. That night the Lord Commander called his officers, and such rangers as had survived enough years to be worth hearing, into the king's tower. Hareth sat among them, leg throbbing, a cup of hot wine growing cold between his hands. The room smelled of wet wool, lamp oil, and smoke from the fresh pyres outside. Corgyle stood beneath a map of the wall and the haunted forest beyond it. Half the strongholds marked there were ghosts. Aemon sat to one side, fingers folded in his sleeves. "We have a dead brother in the yard and a dead village north of the wall," Corgyle said. "Whatever one wishes to call the things Hareth saw, the threat is real enough. Castle Black holds under 700 men, many too old or too green for ranging. The Shadow Tower reports fewer. Eastwatch fewer still. We cannot defend the full 100 leagues of the wall if the woods themselves rise against us." "What he got? Wildlings no tricks," said one black brother, though he sounded as if he wished he did not have to say it. "Do wildlings freeze a corpse so hard his beard lights like kindling?" Corgyle asked. No one answered. Aemon cleared his throat. "In the oldest records kept at Castle Black, there are winters mentioned in a different hand from all other winters. Not harsher merely. Stranger. Birds fled. Wells iced from the bottom upward. Men heard horns in clear weather and found no man who had blown them. More than one such record ends mid-line, as if the writer had put his quill down and never returned." Ancient tales," said another ranger uneasily. "Yes," said Aemon, "and we are fond of ancient tales when they are safely ancient." Corgyle set one hand on the table. "I am sending ravens tonight to Winterfell, White Harbor, Bear Island, Carhold, Last Hearth, the Dreadfort, and every holdfast in the new gift, still willing to answer the watch. Another goes to King's Landing, though I will wager my cloak it reaches the King's rubbish fire before dawn. A third goes to the Eyrie and Storm's End if the birds can find either lord among all the banners being called. We ask for men, pitch, oil, grain, horses, and every archer the North can spare. Nah." He looked around the room. "From this hour every body burns. Brother, wildling, beast. It makes no matter. No corpse passes a night unburned. Any man who disobeys that order answers to me." His eyes found Hareth. "Can you ride again?" Hareth thought of the village and the child and the pale shapes in the trees. He thought of Tumber rising from the sledge with his mouth red and his eyes burning blue. He felt the weight of the wall above them, all that ancient ice, and the emptiness stretching east and west beyond sight. "If you ask it, my lord." "I ask it." Corgyle nodded once. "But not tonight." Later, when the council had thinned and the wind hissed through the tower slits, Hareth saw the Lord Commander standing with Aemon beside the rookery cage, while ravens beat black wings in the torchlight. "Will they believe us?" Hareth heard Corgyle ask. Aemon's blind face tilted toward the night, where the wall gleamed pale as a grave marker. "Men believe what they are prepared to fear," he said. 8 treasoned most are prepared to fear other men. One by one, the ravens were loosed into the dark. By the time the raven reached Winterfell, the castle had forgotten how laughter sounded. Music still played sometimes in the lower hall, because a hall without music became a hall of ghosts. The smith still hammered iron in the yard. Servants still drew water from the steaming pools, and children still ran where they were not wanted. Yet an absence lay over every stone. Rickard Stark was dead in King's Landing, burned by a king who had once called himself his liege. Brandon Stark was dead beside him. Lyanna was gone south into a mystery no one in Winterfell could name the same way twice. Eddard, quiet second son become lord, had ridden from the Eyrie to call the banners and gone south again with most of the men who could fight. So Benjen Stark trained in the yard with boys little older than pages, and men old enough to be his grandsires, and every stroke of a practiced blade tasted of humiliation. The master-at-arms knocked him sprawling before breakfast. Benjen landed hard in wet sand and came up with blood in his mouth. "Again," the man said. Benjen flung back his hair and rose. "You enjoy it. I enjoy you keeping your head attached," said the master-at-arms. "Again." The second bout lasted longer and ended no better. Benjen's anger always carried him into mistakes. Brandon had laughed his way through mistakes, hard and bright as summer thunder. Ned had made so few that men scarcely saw them. Benjen only reddened and heard the muttered kindness in everyone's voice. A raven was waiting when he came into the great hall, cheeks hot and tunic damp with sweat. The bird sat on the maester's glove with its head cocked, and one black eye fixed on the room as if it understood more than any man there. "From Castle Black," the maester said. The hall quieted. Even the dogs by the hearth seemed to sense the change. Benjen wiped his hand on his sleeve before taking the letter. The seal was black wax with the Lord Commander's mark pressed hard into it. His fingers were colder by the time he broke it open. He read badly when anger or fear was on him. The lines swam. He read them once, then again more slowly, and the words only grew worse. Missing villages beyond the wall. Dead men risen. Corpses to be burned at once. Urgent need for men and stores. Matter grave beyond exaggeration. "Give it here," said the maester gently. He did, because his hand had begun to shake. The old man read in silence, his mouth thinning. At the end, he folded the parchment with care too deliberate to be hopeful. "Well?" asked one of the stewards. The maester looked to Benjen first, as courtesy demanded, though courtesy felt a poor thing beside what the letter contained. "Castle Black reports attacks beyond the wall," Benjen said. He heard how young his own voice sounded and hated it. "The Lord Commander asks aid. Grain, oil, men. At once." "Wildlings?" asked the master-at-arms. The maester's eyes moved back to the page. "The letter does not say wildlings." No one said the other word. It seemed too old and foolish for a hall built of honest stone. Benjen made himself ask, "What do you think?" The maester did not answer at once. Steam from the hot springs drifted through the narrow windows and pale banners. Somewhere deeper in the castle, a child laughed, then hushed when someone shushed him. "I think," the old man said at last, "that men on the wall have little taste for jests, and none at all when asking for stores they can scarce defend." Whether the cause is wildling, sickness, or some darker matter, the need is real. No. Then we answer it, Benjen said. The swiftness with which the words came surprised him. Perhaps the hall heard it too. The steward who kept the cellars blinked. The master-at-arms folded his arms. One of the serving girls looked down at her hands as if she had forgotten she held a pitcher. "We have men enough to send a company," said the master-at-arms, "but not many seasoned. Lord Eddard took the best south." "Then we send what we have," Benjen said. "And word to White Harbor, Bear Island, Last Hearth, Carhold. If the watch asks, the North answers." The maester inclined his head. "I will write the ravens." Benjen turned away before anyone could see relief on his face. It angered him that approval should matter. He was a Stark in his own hall. He should not have needed the room to believe him. Yet he did, and knew it. Old Nan found him in the Godswood an hour later. She moved slowly, but no one in Winterfell ever seemed surprised to find her where she should not have been. The red leaves of the heart tree scarcely stirred. Steam drifted through the branches. Benjen stood ankle-deep in damp grass, staring up into the carved face. "So the wall is crying," Old Nan said. He almost smiled despite himself. "The whole castle knows already." "The whole castle knew before the maester broke the seal," she said. "Ravens carry more than letters. They carry weather." Benjen looked down at her. "Do you think it's true?" Old Nan's eyes were clouded with years, but sharp enough still for truth. "The old stories are true enough for what they're meant to do." "And what are they meant to do?" "Remind the living they are living." She settled herself onto a stone bench under the red leaves. "Boys laugh at tales of White Walkers because boys think death wears a face you can strike. Men laugh because men think if a thing has not come in their father's time, it will not come in theirs. The dark does not care what either of them thinks." Benjen had come into the Godswood to be alone. Instead, he sat beside her, because there were not many in Winterfell who still spoke to him as if he were both younger and older than his years. "My father never believed in such tales," he said after a while. "Your father believed in walls," said Old Nan. "What do you think walls are for?" He had no answer to that. He thought of the crypts below and of the empty places where stone statues would one day stand for Rickard and Brandon. He thought of Lyanna, somewhere south and lost. He thought of Ned riding with ice strapped black and bright across his saddle while the realm came apart behind him. The cold wind came then, just one breath of it from the north, sharp enough to cut through wool and leather. Benjen shivered. That afternoon, Winterfell became a place of loading and counting. Casks of oil were rolled into the yard. Sacks of grain were weighed. Arrows were bundled. Mules were harnessed. The master-at-arms chose men who knew the road and had not yet broken their lances in the south. Benjen wanted to ride with them. He nearly said so twice and swallowed the words both times. At dusk, a tanner from the winter town was brought up to the gate with his wife and 2 children. They had come from a croft in the new gift, driving a cart piled with bedding and salted meat, and one old woman too weak to walk. The tanner's beard was stiff with frost, though the road south held no real snow yet. "They're burning bodies at Mole's town," he said in the yard, eyes huge and a face red from wind. Men from the wall came through and said if any corpse dies, burn it. Burn it at once. Said it over and over, like a prayer. "Aye." "Why?" Benjen asked. The tanner looked at him and seemed to realize only then that the boy before him wore stark gray. "Begging pardon, my lord," he said, voice dropping. "Because the dead don't always stay dead." Silence fell so quickly Benjen could hear water dripping from the gatehouse. The old woman on the cart began to whimper. One of the children buried his face in her skirts. Benjen helped settle them in the lower hall himself. He told himself it was because a lord must be seen. The truth was uglier. He wanted to look at the tanner's hands, the children's eyes, the old woman's skin, and assure himself they belonged to the living. That night he rode to Ned by candlelight until wax ran over his knuckles. "The wall sends for help," he wrote. "I have sent what men I can spare, and ravens to all the north. The stories may be more than stories. Do not dismiss this because I am the one who writes it." He stared at that last sentence for a long while before sanding the page. When he finally climbed to the battlements above the gate, the north lay under a dim, hard sky. Frost silvered the yard roofs. Somewhere in the dark below, wheels creaked as the supply wagons rolled out for Castle Black. Benjen watched until the torches were only sparks in the distance. The neck had a way of swallowing sound. The northern host rode south along causeways of packed earth, scarcely wider than a cart, with black water stretching on either side into reeds and mist. Frogs croaked. Insects whined. Men cursed the damp and slapped at midges. Yet beneath all that ordinary misery, there ran another current. The knowledge that they were marching into a war none of them had sought, and all of them now had to win. Eddard Stark rode near the front with ice strapped along his horse's flank in an oiled leather sheath, dark as river mud. The great sword had belonged to his fathers and his fathers' fathers. When he wore it at his back or had it borne behind him, men looked at him differently, as if the steel itself declared him lord in a way grief had not yet managed. He felt no larger for it, only older. The first raven from Winterfell found him on a drizzling afternoon as the host made camp on a rare rise of dry ground. The bird came wet and angry from the rain. Ned broke the seal beneath a drooping awning while men hammered tent pegs into mud and the cooks tried to convince damp wood to burn. He read the letter once, and then a second time more slowly, as if some hidden sense might appear between the lines if he gave it patience enough. When he looked up, Galbart Glover was watching him. So were Rickard Karstark, Helman Tallheart, and Lord John Umber, huge in a cloak that looked more bare than cloth. "Bad news?" Umber asked. "All news is bad now," Ned said. He handed the page to Galbart, who read better than many lords and faster than most. The Glover's jaw tightened. He passed it on. Rain tapped upon the awning. Somewhere nearby, a horse kicked at its stall rope. "Dead men," Umber said at last, as if the words themselves offended him. "Your brother has been listening too long to old women. He has the wall listening with him," said Galbart quietly. Roose Bolton stood just beyond the lamplight, pale-eyed and dry, despite the rain, as if damp had learned to avoid him. "The Lord Commander asks for grain and oil," he said. "Those are plain enough requests. Whatever tale accompanies them, there is need." Ned folded the letter back along its creases. Benjen's hand had grown steadier these last years, though the last line bit deeper into the page than the rest. "Do not dismiss this because I am the one who writes it." He would never have dismissed it for that. For Benjen's age, perhaps. For the season. For the 1,000 practical reasons by which men defend themselves against fear. But not because it came from his brother. "The wall will have aid," Ned said. "How much?" Karstark asked bluntly. There lay the question. Too many men had already ridden south beneath the direwolf banner. Jon Arryn had called, and Ned had answered because honor required it and blood demanded it. Aerys had murdered his father and brother. Rhaegar had taken Lyanna. Robert Baratheon would not stop until the Dragon Prince lay dead, or he did. Nor could Ned turn back now without shattering the alliance before it had fully formed. The North alone could not topple a king. Yet the wall was not some petty holdfast in a border quarrel. If Castle Black asked, it was because there was no one else left to ask. He looked out into the mist, where the marsh water showed only a dull skin under the rain. For an instant he saw not the neck but the crypts beneath Winterfell, stone kings with wolves at their feet, waiting in the cold dark for sons who came too late. "Galbart," he said. The Glover stepped forward at once. "Take 300 riders. Choose men with hard horses and good sense. Turn back at first light. Ride for Winterfell, then the Wall. Use my name to call what levies remain uncalled at White Harbor, Deepwood Motte, Bear Island, the mountain clans if they can be found. Bring grain and oil. Obey the Lord Commander in all matters pertaining to the defense of the Wall. Gemsharan." Galbart bowed his head. "As you command." Umber frowned. 300 is no small bite from our strength. No, Ned said. "But neither is the wall." Roose Bolton's voice came soft as cloth sliding over stone. "If the danger proves less than feared, those men may still guard the north while we break the dragon in the south." "And if it proves worse?" asked Karstark. Ned met his gaze. "Then we will have wished I had sent more." There was no good answer to that. Lords who would have argued over forage or precedence or the number of wagons fell silent instead. In war, men understood the price of sending strength elsewhere. In older fears, price lost its edges. That night, Ned sat long after the camp had settled, writing by the light of a single shielded lantern. One letter went to Benjen, one to Winterfell's maester, another to Jon Arryn, carried by fast rider, warning that the Night's Watch had sent grave tidings and asking whether any word had reached the Eyrie or Gulltown. He thought of writing to Robert too and did not. The Storm Lord would hear it soon enough, and from Ned's own mouth. When the letters were sealed, he held the one for Benjen a moment longer. "Hold Winterfell," he wrote. "Trust the Wall's counsel. Burn all corpses until this matter is understood. I ride south because I must. That does not mean I have forgotten what lies to the north." It was not enough. Nothing he could send by bird or rider would be enough. But he signed his name and pressed his seal into the wax, because a lord's helplessness did not excuse him from acting as a lord. He dreamed poorly. In the dream, he was back in the yard at Winterfell with wooden sword in hand, and Brandon laughing as he disarmed him. Then Brandon's face blackened, skin cracking open like burnt meat, and blue light shone from beneath his lids. Lyanna stood beyond him with winter roses in her hands. When she called Ned's name, frost spilled from her mouth. He woke before dawn with his hand on the hilt of the dagger at his belt and the taste of cold metal in his mouth. Galbart rode out beneath a bruised sky. Ned watched the smaller column vanish northward into mist until there was nothing left but the clink of tack fading over wet ground. Only then did he turn south again. The banners went on. Direwolf, Merman, Merman's son, Thunderbolt, Flayed Man, giant breaking chains. Above them all the sky hung low and gray, as if the world itself stooped closer to listen. Riverrun smelled of river mud, beeswax, wet rushes, and too many people trying not to speak of death. The Tully seat had become a forge where alliances were hammered into shape as hard and hot as any blade. Lords came and went with their cloaks damp from travel. Messengers splashed through the yard at all hours. Men argued in chambers by day and drank together in the hall by night, as if shared wine might cover the raw truth that every oath taken there would soon be paid for in blood. Catelyn Tully had expected Brandon Stark. She had expected his laugh, his confidence, the quick, hot life of him that had filled every chamber he entered. She had expected to be afraid of him a little and pleased with that fear. Instead, she stood in her father's septon, a gown she had once imagined wearing for Brandon, and the man waiting beneath the seven-pointed star was his brother. Younger, quieter, gray-eyed, solemn in a way that seemed carved rather than worn. Eddard Stark spoke his vows clearly. His voice did not shake. Neither did hers. When it was done, the hall shouted for the bedding because men love noise where tenderness is required. Catelyn scarcely heard them. She had looked once into Ned's face during the ceremony and seen no reluctance there, but no joy either. Only duty set so deep it had become a kind of loneliness. Duty was a language she understood. The feast that followed tried its best at celebration. Musicians played. Roast trout and river eels were set out beside bread, onions, hard cheese, and the richer meats kept back for high table. Robert Baratheon drank enough for 4 men, and laughed enough for 10, one arm thrown about the shoulders of whichever lord sat nearest. Yet even his laughter had rough edges now. Grief and fury had gone into him and made a stronger, less careful thing. "To the bride," he thundered, lifting his cup. Men roared it back. "To the groom," shouted someone else. Robert grinned at Ned across the tables. "To my grim northern brother, who could wring solemnity from a wedding feast." There was laughter then, easier than before. Ned even managed the shadow of a smile. Catelyn saw it and wondered whether the man would look very different if he forgot himself entirely. Jon Arryn sat between them all like the hinge on which the room turned. Age had silvered his hair but not dimmed him. His eyes missed nothing. A man could speak lightly before Jon Arryn and still feel weighed afterward. When the music rose again, Catelyn found her husband looking not at the dancers, but at a folded letter beside his trencher. Black wax. She had seen it brought to him before the feast, and watched the color leave his face by degrees as he read. "Another summons to war?" she asked quietly. Ned turned toward her as if he had forgotten she sat beside him. For a moment she feared she had overstepped. Then he said, "In a manner. Will you tell me?" He considered. She liked him for that at once, oddly enough. Brandon would have answered in the same breath he was asked, for good or ill. Ned measured his words as though truth deserved clean handling. "The Night's Watch asks aid," he said. "Something is wrong at the wall. Wildlings? Perhaps." He did not sound convinced. Robert heard the last word and swung around with a goblet in hand. "If it's wildlings, send them a few more arrows and be done. Half the realm is rising already. The crows can fend off raiders well enough." Jon Arryn's gaze moved from Ned to the sealed letter. "What say they exactly?" Ned passed it down. Jon read while Robert drained his cup and motioned for more. Catelyn watched the older lord's expression change little by little, not with fear but with attention. "Strange," Jon said at last. Robert snorted. "Strange? We have a king mad enough to burn great lords alive, and a prince hiding with my betrothed somewhere no one will name plainly. And you call a ranger's fever dream strange?" "No, Ned's brother does not strike me as fevered," Jon said. That checked Robert only a little. "Benjen's a boy. He's a Stark," Ned said more sharply than Catelyn had yet heard him speak. Silence brushed the table. Robert looked at his friend. Then he grunted and leaned back. "A Stark, yes, and I'll not call your kin liars. But if I turn my banners north for every shadow in the snow, Aerys keeps his throne, and Rhaegar keeps Lyanna. The wall has stood 8,000 years. It can stand a few months more." "No, I'm in now." Ned did not answer at once. Catelyn felt, rather than saw, how tightly he held himself. "A few months may be the measure of all things," he said. Jon folded the letter. "Then the wise course is to answer as best we can without breaking what we have not yet finished making. Send men. Send stores. Send warnings. Win the realm, and then the realm may answer a larger call." "Nay, a realm," Robert said, "with me upon its throne. Or none at all," Jon said mildly. The words might have sparked anger in another man. Robert only bared his teeth in something between a grin and a challenge. "Then let us win it quickly." Much later, when the betting had been done with and servants had chased drunk men laughing from the corridors, Catelyn stood in the chamber that was now hers with this grave northern stranger. Firelight moved over the stone walls. Outside, the river rushed past in darkness. Ned set his sword belt aside with care and seemed suddenly uncertain where to put his hands. "You need not be kind to me because of my sister," Catelyn said before he could speak. His brows drew together. "Your sister?" "Lysa wept when Lord Jon was led away," she said. "I thought perhaps you might think I would do the same." A corner of his mouth moved. "I thought perhaps you had more reason than most to hate me. I was meant to come in another man's place." "No." She looked at him then, not at the Stark features she had once imagined with Brandon's expression, but at the man himself, tired and too serious, bearing grief as if it were armor he had no choice but to wear. "I did not know Brandon well enough to hate his brother for living," she said. The honesty of it seemed to ease him. Some of the distance in his face went still, if not away. He touched the black-sealed letter on the table. "There are troubles in the north I do not yet understand." "Then tell me what you do understand." So he did. "Not everything. Men rarely do with strangers, even newly wedded strangers. But enough." He told her of the wall, of a brother left behind at Winterfell, of old stories no sensible man should have been forced to weigh against practical needs. He spoke Lyanna's name only once, but with such careful restraint that Catelyn understood how large a place the girl held in his heart and in Robert's rage. When at last he came to her bed, he was gentle, almost apologetic, and that too she understood. Duty made a poor song, but it could still be sung without cruelty. Before sleep took him, he lay on his back staring at the ceiling beams. "If the wall truly has need," he said into the dark, "I may have left my brother to face more than I knew." Catelyn, who had learned already that there were fears to which comfort was an insult, laid one hand lightly over his. "In Riverrun," she said, "we send strength where the river bites hardest. That is all any lord can do until he sees the flood." She felt his fingers close over hers once, briefly, in thanks. At dawn, he was dressed for war again. Galbart Glover reached Castle Black 2 days after the first bodies were burned, and 1 day before the second ranging went north. He arrived without ceremony, leading hard-ridden men and pack mules laden with grain, lamp oil, arrow bundles, and all the practical things a frightened lord can think to send when he is still unsure what he fears. The wall met him as it met every newcomer, immense, indifferent, and old enough to make a man feel the smallness of his own life. Lord Commander Corgyle wasted no time on courtesies. He read Ned's letter in the yard, gave Galbart a curt nod and said, "You came fast." "My lord came south fast," Galbart replied. "He now sends us north faster." A ghost of approval touched the Lord Commander's thin mouth. "Good. You will ride again before sunset." So Galbart ate standing in the common hall, slept half an hour wrapped in his cloak, and before the light failed entirely rode through the gate beneath the wall with 18 black brothers and 40 Northmen at his back. Hareth came too, pale from his wound but stubborn as old oak. Corgyle himself led, because some men would not ask others to go where they would not. The haunted forest wore the same wrong cold Galbart had smelled on the road, only stronger here. Snow feathered down in dry sparse flakes that did not match the season. It caught in beards and on lashes. The horses disliked the trees. Twice they shied from nothing Galbart could see. "What are we hunting?" he asked Corgyle as they picked their way along a frozen stream. "Survivors if any remain," said the Lord Commander. "Signs if none do. And truth, if truth is foolish enough to leave tracks." "Nani? Da. Dai. Ah." They found a ranger post first, no more than a lean-to in a rough stone ring where fires had been laid. The fire pit was cold. 3 bedrolls lay where they had been dropped. There was blood on the snow beneath one pine, black now in the dim light, and one torn black glove stiff with frost. No bodies. Galbart crouched and touched the blood with 2 fingers, hard as lacquer. "Dragged?" asked one of his men. Corgyle shook his head. "No marks." The answer was worse. They pressed farther north to the wildling village Hareth had escaped. By then the snow had thickened and the woods seemed to draw inward around them, closing off the sky. Galbart had ridden in battle against Ironborn once as a younger man, and later against hill raiders and desperate men in lean years. He knew the look of soldiers on the edge of fear. The Black Brothers had it now, which meant this terror had lived with them at least since Hareth came back. The village appeared suddenly through the trees, white and low and still. Nothing moved. Corgyle dismounted first. Galbart did the same. Men spread out with torches and axes ready. The smell hit them before the sight. Old smoke, frozen meat, and something sweet beneath both. The cloying wrong sweetness of corruption checked by cold. The corpses Hareth had burned were still there, charred where they had fallen. Around them lay others with shattered limbs and severed heads. One body had clawed halfway out from under a drift after being cut in 2, as if it had spent its last strength trying to continue. "This is no wildling trick," said one of Galbart's men, too softly. "No," Galbart said. He was standing over a dead man missing most of his lower jaw when the horse screamed. The sound split the village wide open. Men spun. A mare at the edge of the trees reared, eyes rolling white, as something pale flashed past its forelegs. The animal went over backward. By the time it struck the ground, a dead wildling woman had pulled herself from beneath the snow and sunk her teeth into the horse's throat. "Fire!" Corgyle shouted. The woods answered. Corpses rose all through the village again, some burnt and black, some merely frozen, one crawling with only half a spine. Snow burst upward where hands clawed from below. A black brother swung his axe and chopped into a child's skull. Another dead thing seized his leg and dragged him down. Galbart lunged to help and saw, beyond the flickering torchlight, 3 pale forms among the trees. One of them moved forward. It was taller than any man there, though slender as a spear. Armor grew over it in ridges and plates like ice-made flesh. Its face might have been beautiful if beauty could exist without warmth or mercy. In its hand it held a sword so thin Galbart could scarcely see it, until torchlight struck the edge and shattered there. He did what every sensible man should do before a marvel from a child's tale. He charged it with steel. The thing met him in silence. Galbart's longsword came down hard enough to split helm and skull in one stroke if his enemy had been human. The pale sword rose to meet it, and for one impossible instant steel screamed against something that sounded like frozen glass. A white numbness ran from blade to hilt into Galbart's arm. He staggered back. His sword had not broken, but frost webbed across it from the point to the guard. The other's eyes were blue and empty and utterly awake. An arrow took it in the throat. Not Galbart's men, Hareth's. The ranger had loosed from 10 paces, the shaft blazing where a scrap of oil-soaked rag had been tied near the head. Fire licked up the pale figure's armor. For the first time it moved with something like haste, recoiling into the trees. The flame guttered in the snowfall, but not before Galbart saw skin crack like thin ice over black water. "Back!" Corgyle roared. "Back to the horses!" They fought their retreat yard by yard. Galbart hacked through dead flesh that did not care to bleed. Hareth lost 2 fingers to a corpse that bit through glove and mail before a torch was rammed into its open mouth. One Northman vanished under a knot of small blue-eyed bodies and never rose again. By the time they reached the horses, 3 black brothers and 5 of Galbart's riders were dead, and 2 more torn too badly ever to ride hard. The pale figures in the trees did not pursue. They watched, motionless, while the living fled south. Once Galbart looked back and saw the one he had met stoop beside the fallen bodies. It placed a hand upon the chest of a dead black brother as one might upon the shoulder of a companion. The corpse sat up. Galbart put his spurs to the horse so hard that gelding screamed. They did not stop until the wall loomed over them in dusk and ice shadow. Men on the top saw the state of them and began lowering torches before the riders were half through the gate. That night, while wounds were stitched and the dead burned hot enough to warp the iron of a grate, Galbart stood with Corgyle atop the wall and looked north. "They are real," he said. Corgyle did not ask who he meant. "Yes. Can they be killed?" The Lord Commander's face was a cut of dark stone in the moonlight. "Everything that walks this world can be killed. The trouble is learning how before it kills you." Below them, the pyres spat orange into the night. Above, the sky was clean and pitiless. Somewhere in the forest, far beyond sight, a horn blew once. A low note, ancient and thin. Galbart had not believed in ghosts since childhood. Standing upon the wall, he found he had made the old error of mistaking disbelief for safety. Winterfell began to fill with strangers. They came on carts, on shaggy garans, in sleighs dragged over roads not yet meant for sleighs, and on blistered feet wrapped in old cloth. They came from crofts in the New Gift, from Mole's Town, from little clusters of huts that had no names Southron maesters ever wrote down. They came carrying children, bedding, grain sacks, icons from septs, bundles of herbs, one old man's cage of hens. One young woman's dead husband laid in the wagon bed beneath a blanket because she had not yet believed what the Black Brothers told her to do. That husband burned outside Winterfell's gates before sundown. Benjen ordered it himself and stood there until the fire took properly. The young widow screamed at him and called him heartless. He let her. Better that than what might have happened if he yielded. Jor Mormont rode in the next day with 30 men from Bear Island, all broad-shouldered and weathered, with axe heads wrapped against the damp and a smell of salt still in their cloaks. Lord Jor looked more like a raider from some old song than the master of a hard northern island. He had black hair going iron gray, and a beard thick enough to hide half his face, though not the scar under one eye. He came into the hall with snowmelt dripping from his boots, took one look at the frightened folk huddled along the walls, and said, "So, we are late." Benjen had known him all his life, and yet straightened as if before a stranger. "You are welcome, my lord." Jor snorted. "If I'm welcome, give me hot ale and the truth." He got both. By evening, the great hall held Jor, the master-at-arms, the maester, a Serwyn knight, 2 tall hearts, and a half-dozen stewards who knew where grain lay stored and how quickly fear could empty cellars. Letters had come as well, Carhold promising men but delayed by weather, White Harbor sending food and ships to Eastwatch if sea and tide allowed, the Dreadfort offering exact numbers in a hand so cold it might have been drafted by winter itself. Last Hearth had sent no letter yet, only one terse line by rider, "Coming." The refugees were questioned one by one where they stood near the fire. Benjen listened until his head pounded. A swineherd from the gift said his dead daughter had opened her eyes after he laid her out. A woman from Mole's town said Black Brothers had dragged 2 corpses from a brothel and hacked them apart in the street before burning them. A miller's son swore there had been shapes in the woods north of the King's Road, pale as moonlit milk and tall as lords. Another man had seen nothing himself but heard screaming in a stead where no one lived now. "Fear fattens on travel," the maester said quietly when the hall had emptied a little. "Every mile adds a detail." Jor drank, wiped foam from his beard, and grunted. "Aye, but fear does not build the same tale in 100 mouths if there's no truth underneath." Benjen sat at the high table where his father had sat, and his brother after him. The chair felt too large still. "What would you do?" Jor looked at him directly. There was no mockery in the old lord, only appraisal. "Send more men to the wall. Empty every holdfast in the gift that can't defend itself. Burn any corpse before the blood cools. Keep the roads open to Winterfell and White Harbor. And pray your brother wins his war quickly." Benjen's hands curled on the carved wood arms of the seat. "I could ride north." Jor's expression altered almost imperceptibly. "You could, and if I were 14, I'd have said the same before any man finished the question." Benjen flushed hot. "I am not a child." "No," Jor said. "That is exactly the trouble. You are the Stark in Winterfell. If you die trying to prove you are grown, the North loses more than a sword arm." Old Nan laughed softly from her place by the hearth. No one had seen her come in. "The cub bares his teeth," she said. "Good. Teeth are useful, but a cub is still what guards the den when the old wolves are gone." Jor's mouth twitched. "A wiser woman than most lords I know." Benjen wanted to resent the agreement between them, and found he could not. Because under the shame of being held back lay something worse: relief. They were interrupted by shouting from the yard. Every man in the hall came to his feet at once. Benjen was first through the doors, cloak half thrown over one shoulder, and out into the yard where torchlight leaped over stone and steam. Men were running toward the stables. A horse shrieked. "The wounded one!" someone shouted. "He's up!" One of the refugees, a carter brought in that morning with a bite on his arm and fever by dusk, had died in the stable loft while the maester fetched poppy milk. He had not yet been carried out. Now he came down the ladder on twisted legs with blood all over his chin and a stable boy dangling from one hand. The boy was still alive. For that instant, at least. Benjen did not remember drawing the dagger at his belt. He only remembered Jor's hand on his shoulder, shoving him aside as the dead carter lurched forward. Jor's axe split the man from collarbone to breastbone. The corpse kept coming. The stable boy's body struck the ground with a sound Benjen would hear later in sleep. "Fire!" Jor bellowed. Benjen snatched a torch from the wall bracket and thrust it forward with both hands. Flame caught in the dead man's beard. He let out a ragged sound between a hiss and a scream and reached for Benjen with fingers black at the nails. Jor chopped off the reaching hand. The master-at-arms barreled in from the side with another torch. Oil splashed. The whole front of the corpse went up at once, lighting the stable yard orange. The horses went mad, kicking their stalls. A groom crossed himself. One refugee woman began sobbing. Benjen stood his ground until the burning corpse at last collapsed. Only then did he look at the stable boy. The child could not have been older than 12. One side of his throat was gone. Snow around him steamed. For one shattering instant, Benjen saw not the boy but himself at 12, racing with Bran. No, there was no Bran yet, only memory making tricks of time. Racing with the kennel boys through the yard before the world had opened and swallowed half his kin. He swallowed hard enough to hurt. "Burn the boy too," Jor said roughly, "because kindness sometimes must wear a rough face." Now, the stablemaster made a broken sound. Benjen forced himself to nod. The pyre was built in the yard where all could see it. He stood through that one too. When it was done, the smoke drifted over the walls and out into a night turning colder by the hour. Later, much later, Jor found him in the covered walk beside the godswood. "You held the torch steady," the Bear Lord said. Benjen laughed once without humor. "So did a serving man. Shall I knight him? I have known grown men to drop fire when less came at them." Jor leaned his broad back against cold stone. "Listen to me, boy." Benjen talked to ye. "Listen to me, Benjen. Fear is no shame. Panic is. Tonight you feared and did not panic. That is a better beginning for a lord than half the realm ever gets. Me, and die." Benjen looked away into the dark garden where the heart tree watched and said nothing. Jor went on. "When next you write your brother, do not hide this from him." "I had not meant to." "Good." Jor pushed off the wall. "And in the morning, we send another 100 men north." "Another 100? Benjen turned. "If I had 1,000 to spare, I would send them." Jor's face hardened. The wall is not asking because it enjoys the taste of begging. When he had gone, Benjen stayed where he was. The wind moved through the red leaves with a sound like dry whispers. Somewhere beyond the godswood lay the crypts. Somewhere far beyond the crypts, the wall rose under a hardening sky. Somewhere beyond that, if the old stories were true, and the present uglier than any old tale, winter was beginning to walk. Rain turned the camp below Riverrun into a country of mud. Men moved through it with cloaks over their heads and curses on their lips, hauling barrels, leading horses, setting spears upright in racks, trying to keep powder dry that no one possessed and tempers drear still. War made every camp the same after a few days. Wet leather, wood smoke, horse dung, and the smell of too many men eating too much salt meat in too little space. Ned was in Jon Arryn's command tent when the second raven from Winterfell arrived. The bird came at dusk, soaked to the bone, and pecked blood from the falconer's thumb before yielding the letter. Jon took one look at the seal and handed it to Ned without a word. Benjen's hand this time was darker on the page, hurried in places, hard enough in others to leave the parchment ridged. Refugees burning, a dead man risen within Winterfell itself. Jor Mormont at the castle. More men sent north. Desperate request for all aid that could be spared. There was a second scrap tucked inside in another hand, shorter and rougher. Galbarts. Saw them. Not dead men only. Pale ones. Steel hates them. Fire better. Tell Winterfell to burn every corpse. For a moment, the rain outside seemed to stop. "Ned?" said Jon. He gave the letters over. The older lord read them both, his lined face unreadable but for the deepening set at the corners of his mouth. "Summon Robert," Jon told a squire. Robert came in with rain on his beard and a half-fastened cloak, smelling of wet wool and ale. "If this is another lesson in river crossings, I'm for sleep instead." Jon handed him the pages. Robert read more quickly than most gave him credit for, though impatience showed in the force with which he turned each leaf. Halfway through, the humor left his face. By the end, he swore. That boy is seeing ghosts. Galbart Glover sees them too, Ned said. Robert flung the paper onto the table. Then Galbart has been too long in the snow. Ned's temper, banked for weeks by necessity, stirred at last. A corpse rose in Winterfell and killed a stable boy. Robert's eyes flashed. You think I call your brother a liar? I think you call him mistaken because the truth is inconvenient. The tent went still. Rain drummed on leather overhead. Jon Arryn stood between them only by accident of position, but the space he occupied suddenly seemed the narrowest thing in the world. Robert took one step forward. He was larger than Ned in every way men count size, broader through chest and shoulder, louder even when silent. The truth is that Aerys Targaryen sits the Iron Throne, and while he sits it he can command the Reach, the West, half the Crown Lands, and every page sword this side of Braavos, if he has coin enough. The truth is that Rhaegar has Lyanna somewhere in the south while we stand here talking of corpses. The truth is, if I turn north now, we lose. Ned did not move. And if the wall falls while we make ourselves ready, it has not fallen. Yet. Robert's mouth hardened. Gods, Ned. Do you think I don't hear the danger? I hear it. I hear it, and I hate it. Because it asks me to fight mist when there's flesh enough in the south that deserves my hammer first. Nay. Now. Jon put one hand on the table. Listen to yourselves. They did because Jon Arryn had been the man to teach them both when to fight and when to stop. We are not deciding whether the danger in the north is real, Jon said. We are deciding what answer is possible. If we break this alliance and turn our forces homeward now, Hoster Tully is left exposed, the Arryn banners divided, the Baratheon cause weakened, and the king free to destroy each of us in turn. Then the north fights whatever rises there alone. If we press on and win, the whole realm may yet answer one call. None. May? Ned said. May, Jon agreed. All war is wager. Robert dragged a hand through his wet hair and began to pace. The tent felt smaller with every turn he made. I did not rise to leave my people to ghosts, he said. But neither did I rise to let the dragon keep what he stole. Lyanna's name did not need speaking. It stood among them all the same. Ned thought of Winterfell's walls, of Benjen with a torch in hand over some poor dead child, of Galbart's blunt script, of the wall under moonlight, and the old stories he had half believed, because old stories belonged with firelight and age, not with letters written in haste by men he trusted with his own life. He also thought of his father burning in the Red Keep, Brandon strangling on his own rage, and the long road south that had brought them to this point. There was no path that did not betray someone. What do you propose? He asked Jon. The same thing you have already begun, Jon said. More men north, more stores. Every warning we can send, and speed here, no delays. No feasting beyond what duty requires. We force the issue in the field as swiftly as we can. Robert stopped pacing. Aerys first. Ned looked at him. The wall after. Robert met his gaze with the raw ferocity that had won men and would one day break them. On my life. It was the nearest oath Ned would get that night. From a high window in Riverrun, Catelyn saw the three of them emerge sometime later under the rain. Jon with his cloak wrapped close, Robert striding as if the mud should part for him, Ned walking between duty and dread with his face shut hard as winter stone. She could not hear what was said below. She saw enough to know that friendship had not softened the argument. When Ned came to her chamber near midnight, he was wet to the skin. She helped him with his cloak without speaking. He stood while she unpinned the sodden wool and set it by the hearth, his hands braced on the edge of the table where the letters lay drying. I am sending more men north, he said at last. And you are still going south? Yes. There it was again. That terrible plainness in him. No flourish. No hope, dressed in bright colors. Only the fact. She touched the page with Galbart's hand. Do you believe this? He looked at the black ink as if it might change if watched long enough. I believe the men who wrote it. That is worse. Then perhaps Lord John is right. He let out a breath that could almost have been laughter if there had been any mirth left in it. You grow loyal to my foster father quickly. I grow loyal to outcomes, she said. A lord who abandons one war to lose another saves no one. Ned lifted his eyes. Weariness had opened him more than ease ever did. There are times I think every choice made of duty is only choosing who shall hate us later. Then you are a lord indeed, she said. Something softened in him at that, enough that he reached for her hand and held it for a moment in both of his. Outside, rain fell on leather and canvas and river water, and the camp of a rebellion slept uneasily under the walls of a house that had become a hinge for kingdoms. Before dawn, new riders left for the north. The attack came on a moonless night when the wind blew hard enough from the north to flay the water from a man's eyes. Castle Black had settled into that false quiet that follows too many bad days. Men sleeping in pieces, armor close at hand, boots never fully removed. Fires banked but not out. Galbart had taken the middle watch atop the wall with 20 archers and a bucket line of pitch ready below. Aerith leaned on the battlement not far away, wrapped in furs and bandages, muttering that the cold smelled wrong again. Beneath them, the yard glimmered with patches of old ice. The tunnel under the wall crouched black and narrow iron gates shut. No one heard the first corpses arrive. It was the horses that knew. Every beast in the stables began to scream at once. The sound tore through the night so savagely that men stumbled from sleep, convinced the castle itself had split. Then, the horn blew. One blast. The call for rangers. Two more came after it, close together, and every man on the wall went cold in a new way. Enemies. Galbart ran to the northern edge and looked down. At first there seemed to be only darkness, snow, and the edge of torchlight thrown from the wall. Then the darkness moved. Bodies packed the ground before the gate. Wildlings, black brothers, animals, shapes he could not name. Shambling, lunging, slipping on the ice and climbing over one another in a silent crush. Eyes burned blue all through the host like shards of frozen stars. Wake them all, Galbart roared. Pitch! Get the pitch! Below, bells began to ring. Men poured into the yard half-dressed, grabbing spears, bows, torches. Corgyle appeared as if conjured from the stone itself, helmetless and hard-faced, black cloak snapping in the wind. Aemon came too, guided by a steward, his old face pale in the lantern light. How many? The maester asked. Too many, Galbart shouted back. The dead struck the gate then. Timber boomed. Iron screamed in its fittings. The tunnel under the wall carried every sound up through stone and ice so that the whole castle seemed to feel the impact in its bones. Oil the murder holes, Corgyle bellowed. Archers, loose only for the living dead, no wasted shafts. Builders to the inner bars. That last would have sounded mad in any other war, but this one demanded its own language. Flaming pitch poured through the slits above the tunnel mouth. Fire flowered at once over the front ranks. Corpses staggered, burned, kept coming. A dead horse reared against the gate, with half its hide gone. A man with no lower jaw gnawed at the timber. One black brother in old torn wool stood among them with a chunk of his throat missing, and kept battering the wood with both fists as if he still remembered anger. Arrows fell thick and fast from the wall. Galbart loosed until his fingers bled under the glove. Fire worked where steel alone often did not. The dead tangled, toppled, burned. Those behind climbed over them. The gate shuddered again. Then, a deeper roar split the night, and a shape larger than any man crashed out of the snow. Bear! Someone screamed. It had once been a snow bear, enormous and white. Now most of one's shoulder was stripped to bone, and one eye shone blue in a skull half laid open. It hit the gate with such force that the inner bars jumped from their sockets. Men cursed. One dropped his torch over the side. Hareth seized the next man's spear and hurled it down with both hands. The shaft vanished into rotten fur and did nothing. Corgyle did not waste a heartbeat on amazement. "Bring the chain nets," he shouted, "and every pot of oil we have left." "Every pot?" cried a steward. "Do you know a better use for it?" Below them, builders dragged out iron-linked nets used sometimes for hauling stone. The bear hit the gate again. One of the hinges groaned. Corpses clawed through the widening gap beneath. Galbart turned and nearly ran full into Aemon, who had climbed farther onto the wall than any sensible man would have let him. "Lord Glover," the maester said into the storm. "Where are they?" Galbart knew whom he meant. He looked north past the fire and the crush at the gate, into the spinning dark beyond. There, along the tree line, stood a row of pale shapes, perhaps 6, perhaps more. Snow hissed around them and never seemed to settle. They watched the assault as lords might watch hounds run down deer. One lifted its face toward the wall. A cold sharper than wind touched Galbart's cheek. There, he said. Aemon's blind eyes turned to the same place with terrible accuracy. "Then this is only the beginning." The gate burst inward. Dead hands reached through the gap, clutching wood, iron, air. A black brother on the inner stairs thrust down with a spear and had it torn from him. The snow bear shoved its ruined head through and bit the nearest builder nearly in half. Men broke then, some falling back in terror, others surging forward in the stupid bravery born when there is nowhere left to retreat. Galbart did not remember descending from the wall. One moment he was above, the next in the tunnel yard with smoke in his eyes and a shield in his hand, shouting Northmen and Black Brothers into a line before the inner passage. Corgyle was there already, sword red from wrist to point. Hareth, of all men, came limping beside him with a torch like a club. "Hold!" the Lord Commander shouted. "Hold here or die in your beds!" The dead came through the broken gate in knots and clumps, slipping on their own ash, still terrible. Galbart smashed one across the face with the shield rim and drove a sword through its eye. Hareth rammed his torch into the mouth of another. A builder with no war training at all swung a hammer and crushed both knees of a dead wildling, then stood staring while it crawled toward him until Corgyle split its spine. The bear forced half its body through the gap before men dropped the net over it. Burning oil followed. The beast thrashed with such fury that 3 men were hurled against the tunnel walls. The smell of scorched fur and rotten meat filled every breath. Above it all, the wind howled, and from beyond the gate came a sound like laughter made of ice. Galbart looked once through the smoke and saw one of the pale figures closer than before, standing just outside the firelight with its strange sword in hand. Its blue eyes met his. It did not attack. It watched. Then the corpse of the bear collapsed in flames and the tunnel filled with smoke thick enough to choke. The dead behind it milled, stumbled, burned. Men on the wall above toppled barrels, stones, anything heavy enough to crush. Fire finally did what steel could not. It made the press at the gate impossible even for things that did not fear pain. By dawn, the assault had broken. Not ended. Galbart knew better than that. Broken, like surf against rock that will simply gather itself and return. Corpses smoldered in heaps before the tunnel. The gate was shattered, the bars bent, the yard red with blood and black with burn. 23 men of the watch were dead, along with 11 of Galbart's Northmen. More were wounded, and all of them looked hollow-eyed. Lord Commander Corgyle stood in the yard blackened by smoke and gave orders with the same dry precision he might have used for tallying turnips. "Burn everything outside the gate," he said. "Then burn it again. Builders, get me timber from every spare store and start a second barricade behind the tunnel mouth. Archers rest in shifts. Ravens at once, to Winterfell, White Harbor, Riverrun, the Eyrie, King's Landing, anywhere a bird can fly and still find a hand to open a scroll." "None." Aemon's face was gray with weariness. He put one hand upon the scorched stone of the yard wall and said, "To no one and everyone, the wall is no longer warning the realm. It is pleading with it." Hareth sat down hard in the snow and laughed once, because men laugh sometimes when terror has stripped everything else from them. Galbart went to the top of the wall again when the light strengthened. North of the castle, the forest stood dark and very still. The pale figures were gone. But in the snow below, where the dead had stood in their thousands, he could see the long marks of bodies dragged back into the wood. The raven from Castle Black arrived with soot on its claws. Ned knew before the seal was broken that the news had worsened. Men did not smear ash on parchment for effect. The letter inside had been written in a hand pressed hard enough to split the nib in places. Lord Commander Corgyle wasted no words. Castle Black attacked. Gate nearly broken. Corpses in great numbers. Pale enemies commanding the dead. Fire necessary. Men dying. Immediate aid beyond all previous requests. There was a second line, added below in smaller script. Almost an afterthought, though it struck hardest. This is no tale for a winter hearth. The ancient enemy walks. Ned stood in the command tent for a long while with the parchment open in both hands. Outside, the camp was waking. Smiths at work. Horses watered. Men coughing smoke from their lungs and talking of scouts and roads and the king's next move. The ordinary noises of war. They seemed to belong to another world. Robert came in without waiting to be announced, as he always had. He had a whetstone in one hand and his warhammer slung across his back. "John says you've another bird from the wall." Ned handed it over. Robert read more slowly this time. By the end, the cords stood out in his forearms. He set the letter down with care too controlled to be calm. "Well," he said, "there it is." Jon Arryn entered then, as if summoned by the change in the air. He took one look at their faces and reached for the page. No one spoke while he read. At last he let the parchment lower. Then the choice remains what it was yesterday, only crueler. Robert rounded on him. "Crueler? Say impossible and be done." "No," Jon said. "Impossible is for songs. This is merely grievous." Nah. Ned had never wanted to strike his foster father in all the years he had known him. But grief and fear make strange shadows in the heart. "My brother is there," he said. "My men. My home lies south of the wall. Every mile we spend chasing crowns is a mile the dead may use." "And if you turn now?" Jon asked. "You reach the neck with a divided host, perhaps. Aerys and his loyalists remain in the field. The Reach closes the roads. The West remains uncertain. The Riverlords who have joined us are left to the dragon's vengeance. The North gains one lord, and loses the war that might have united the realm." "Nah, me, Ginka." Ned knew every word of it was true. Truth did not make it easier to swallow. Robert picked up the letter again. His thumb had left a wet mark from rainwater on the edge. "I gave you my word," he said, not looking at Ned. "The wall after." "The wall now," Ned said. Robert's head came up. Rage flared there, but not at Ned alone. At the world, at the timing, at gods and kings and dead men who demanded their place in a war already too full. "Do you think I am made of two armies?" he shouted. "Do you think I can split myself and be hammer in the south and shield in the north at once?" "No," Ned said. "I think every road before us is bad." Robert laughed once, harshly. "On that we agree." He began to pace, hammering the ground with each step as if the earth itself were stubborn. "If I ride north with you, Aerys calls it flight. Lords who waver now will turn back. Rhaegar gathers strength unopposed. We lose the chance to take the Iron Throne when the realm is already cracking under him. Then what? We hide behind Moat Cailin while a crowned madman rules the south and the dead rule the north?" Ned had no answer that was not another shape of despair. Jon put both hands on the table between them. "Hear me. The north needs more than swords. It needs grain from the riverlands. Timber from everywhere. Pitch, oil, arrows. Ships from White Harbor and Eastwatch. Smiths, masons, men enough to garrison every abandoned holdfast along the wall. That aid is not coming from a realm still at war with itself. You know this." Ned did know it. Knowing it felt like betrayal. Robert stopped pacing. When he spoke again, The fury in him had settled into something heavier. "I will not leave your brother to die if there's any way to save him." "Words," Ned said, harsher than he intended. Robert looked as if the blow had landed. "Then hear more than words. Send every Northman we can spare, and every cart of pitch, grain, and salt beef we can pry from our allies. Send riders to White Harbor, Gulltown, the Fingers to call every ship not nailed to a dock. Send word to Storm's End, and the Vale that any man who can march marches north the hour the dragon falls. And I swear before the gods that once I have the crown, or once I have smashed the prince and broken the king's power if the crown itself must wait, I ride north in person." "No, do." Ned held his gaze. Robert had lied before, as all men do in small things, in drink and desire, in the easy vanity of youth. He had never lied in the iron center of himself, not to Ned. "When?" he asked. "When the South cannot knife us in the back for doing it," Robert said. "Not a day later." Jon exhaled, as if some knot had tightened less. "Then we act." They did, because there was nothing else left but action. Scribes were summoned. Orders flew out faster than breakfast smoke. Every unattached horse in camp was counted. Every cart fit for road was marked. Men from the north who were too green or too lightly armed for the next southern battle were reassigned and sent homeward in small hard-riding bands with letters for Winterfell and White Harbor. Jon rode to the Vale, to Gulltown, to old bannermen who still trusted his name. Poster Tully, when told, offered grain stores and river transport where roads failed. Robert sent one curt message to Storm's End with his own seal pressed deep enough to crack the wax. Ned wrote longest to Benjen. "The wall has been assailed, and I believe now all you have written. Jor Mormont's counsel is to be followed as if it were mine. Burn every corpse. Strip the gift of all folk who cannot defend themselves and bring them south of Winterfell if need be. White Harbor and Bear Island are commanded to aid you. Hold the castle. Hold the road. Hold yourself. I am not absent from you in my heart, because I remain in the south." He stared at the last line until the ink dried. When the letters were gone, and the riders scattered, he walked out beyond the last ring of tents to where the ground rose over the river. Robert found him there at sunset. For a while they said nothing. "I used to think," Robert said at last, "that if I put my hammer through Rhaegar's chest, all of the world's crookedness would right itself." Ned almost smiled. "That was never likely." "No." Robert scrubbed a hand over his beard. "But a man likes a simple enemy." Ned looked north, though he could not possibly see so far. "So does a realm." Robert stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder as in younger days at the Eyrie. "We'll make one war small enough to fight the next," he said. "That's the best I've got." It was not enough. It would never be enough. Yet Ned nodded, because friendship sometimes survives on what is inadequate so long as it is honestly given. Far away, Benjen Stark stood atop Winterfell's battlements with Jor Mormont beside him, and read his brother's letter by torchlight while the wind worried the edges of the page. Below them, the castle yard boiled with work. Refugees moved into sheds and stables. Wagons were unloaded, arrows bundled, oil casks rolled beneath awnings, boys sent running with orders. Old Nan sat near the lower fire with children gathered at her skirts, and even from above Benjen could see the solemn lift of her hand as she told them some tale they would no longer think a tale. The sky to the north had a hard glass brightness to it. No snow fell, yet the world looked ready to break. "He believes now," Benjen said. Jor grunted. "Good. Will it be enough?" The older lord rested both huge hands on the stone before him. "Enough is a word for summer." Benjen folded the letter carefully. His brother's hand was steady all through it, but he could read the pressure in the strokes, the restraint, the choice not to write the fears both of them now knew. Below, a child began to cry. Somewhere in the yard a horse stamped and snorted. Somewhere outside the walls, a wolf answered another on the long dark road. Beyond Winterfell, beyond the gift of hot springs and walls and watchfires, beyond the wall itself, the forest of the far north stood under stars like cold nails hammered into black iron. There the dead were gathering in silence. Not the scattered corpses of one village now, nor the broken handfuls that had battered Castle Black's gate, but ranks upon ranks drawn from wildling camps, lost rangers, beasts brought low in winter hollows, and all the uncounted bones of the north that had waited years for a summons no living ear could hear. Pale figures moved among them with the patience of ice advancing over water. Where one passed, blue light opened in dead eyes. Where another paused, frozen branches bowed as if in reverence. South, banners rose for kings. South, lords measured roads, grain, oaths, bloodlanes, and the worth of one army against another. South, men prepared to decide the fate of a throne. North, something older than thrones had begun its march.